Hello everyone, my name is Megan and I am an ENFJ. Just kidding. That's not what this video is going to be, but you know what? I whipped out this Mac photo booth app, so I was feeling nostalgic. This video, I'm mostly going to be talking directly to those of you who already know me and who have followed me for a while. So if things don't make sense, just let me know and we will get to it. So, the crisis of complexity, a call for individuation in 2025. I had this thought this morning, and I'm going to talk it through and unpack it here verbally, and we'll see where it goes. So take a seat, chill out, sit back and relax, because there's a lot I want to talk about. And really, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that's happened. And there's a lot of content that I want to make, but this video really for me is, I'm pushing through creative blocks as we speak. And I figured might as well just film me thinking out loud, because that's what I've done in the past. And I am definitely an external verbal processor. While I do like to journal, and since I've not been on YouTube as much, really at all, the past couple of years, I've been journaling quite a bit. But you know what? Talking aloud and hearing my own voice, yeah, I just love to hear my own voice. No, it's like it's a different level of feedback than journaling. So that's what we're gonna do. So, I had the thought this morning, first of all, how are you guys hanging in there? How are you dealing with this increasingly complex world? Let me know, are you still interested in personality type? Have you gotten turned off by it? Are you still active in the community? Have you forgotten about it? What are you thinking? Because the thought I had this morning was about how it feels like we're in a crisis of complexity as a culture. And I also was thinking about how my observations, I'm speaking very specifically from a Western point of view because I live in the United States, and it was making me think about how Carl Jung, the entire theory of personality type, started with the idea of the crisis of the Western mind. And I had the thought this morning, I was like, I think we're kind of seeing the crisis of the Western mind right now. So isn't that cool that we're alive to see it? We're alive to see what Carl Jung was kind of warning us about. And so much clicked into place for me that made me really excited because, so to start, I am going to link below. I posted a video, it was August 2022, called A Call for Complexity. And I also did a talk with the same title that, at somewhere. I need to look that up. But I was just listening to part of, or at least the first half of that podcast episode, The Call for Complexity, that I did in 2022. Because trying to jog my memory. And so much of what I was talking about in that is really relevant today, even more so. I was talking about the problem of opposites and how it's important to tap into your inner paradox. So that means recognizing the introverted and extroverted parts of you, the intuition, the sensing, the feeling, the thinking, and using that to channel your own creativity, propel you toward the individuation journey. And what I was saying at that time in 2022 is that society is even more divided than ever, and that I was feeling a call for us to embrace the complexity rather than overly identifying with just your personality type. And I think what's changed since 2022 is that Like perhaps I was feeling into a subtle call, or I was maybe feeling pushed personally to develop my inner complexity ever since basically I got into personality type when I was 18 because I was having my own crisis of not knowing what to study in college. And learning that I was an NF was really validating because I had given up on my dreams of being an artist. So to recognize I'm an NF, that's how my brain works, and to think, okay, well, what else am I good at? Because if I'm unable to realistically make money as an artist, then who am I? Like, seriously, what roles are there for me? What am I good at? Because if my entire time throughout childhood, high school, adolescence was me pursuing art, and that was the thing that made me feel regulated and gave me strength and made me feel like myself, what the heck is my adult life going to be? And so that's what led me to even being interested in personality type to begin with. And the more I went down the rabbit hole and I learned about Jungian theory, I learned, and I talked about it more in the Call for Complexity video, I learned how Carl Jung was, skeptical of the way that things like MBTI and like personality tests use labels to overly identify with one type or over another. And, I very quickly became more interested in the element of the psychological functions or the cognitive functions, and also just shadow work in general. And I did a talk for APTI, I can't remember what year now, where I was talking about type on the internet. And I was talking about my experience of the personality community on the internet, and just also my experience as a digital marketer, and just and working in social media, not only as like a micro influencer, if you want to call it that, but also like for my day job, I was managing social media. And so I was talking a little bit about, I was trying to bridge the gap between older generations and younger generations. And one of the things that occurred to me that I believe I mentioned in that talk, and I've kind of had this in the back of my mind for several years now, is the idea that Carl Jung wrote a lot about the idea of the midlife crisis. And don't quote me on that. I think, what does he call it? The second form of life. Anyway, I need to read up more on that, but the gist of it is that Jung talked about how, people will spend they'll develop their ego, and then when they get to midlife, they wonder, what else is there? And what I feel like I knew very strongly and always knew, and this feels even more relevant now, is the fact that millennials have been having a crisis way before midlife. I've joked that I had like a quarter life crisis. And one of the things that I was thinking about whenever I was talking about like the impact of the type community, talking about type online, and something I wanted to kind of convey to the adults in the room, even though I am an adult. I'm 30, you guys. I'm old. But, at the time, what it was, I like 25, 26. I truly don't know. My first video that I posted on here, I believe I was 21. So, whew. But here, I'm just going to say this straight up. I do not think that most millennials, unless you are incredibly privileged, have had the privilege or the ability to be their type. I think that we have experienced ego death at a way wider scale. I think that the internet has definitely affected the psyche. I think if we think about the idea of the collective unconscious, the fact that there is this web that connects all of our minds. The fact that that was thought of before the internet is crazy. And I've been thinking about this nonstop because we are the children of the internet. Me specifically. I don't know how old you are watching this. I was born in 1994, right around the time the internet was getting going. And yeah, like I'm a digital native. I have always known basically the internet being around. It's shaped my life, and I have so many assumptions about how the world works based on just knowing that the internet exists. And if you think about the psychology of that, just like as a child, even knowing that I was fully connected to everyone on the planet, or even knowing that that was possible, that obviously is going to impact you. And something I mentioned in the Call for Complexity video was about how while it's important to, look to Jung as a thought leader and look to the great works of, the greats as a way to learn from, what am I trying to say, is that we learn new things every day. Like humans are evolving as a species. We have new tools that we interact with. We're basically just fancy monkeys. Like monkeys learn how to peel a banana on their own. Whatever, they can learn to use tools. Think about how much the advancement of our tools has the potential to impact us. I mean, that's not a new idea by any means. But what I have been coming to believe is, well, okay, there's a lot I could say. And so this is why I'm saying that this is me unpacking this out loud, because I do plan to make content on these things specifically. So I guess I'll just throw out there right now. If you have any questions, comment it. If I'm losing you, if I'm not making sense, comment and tell me so that you can help me figure out how to organize my thoughts. But here's a point. My inferior TI has changed a lot. I'm not even sure if you could tell if you're someone who's followed me a lot. But kind of bringing me to my point of millennials have not had the luxury or the privilege to be their personality type. Where are the ENFJ jobs? I don't feel that I've been able to develop my ego as an ENFJ only for it to come crashing down in midlife. I feel that I have had multiple crash outs throughout my life trying to be the ENFJ and then crashing, trying to be it and then crashing, because here's the deal. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. MBTI took Carl Jung's theory and created, from thinking about the 8 cognitive functions, developed 16 like archetypes or personas or egos, whatever. I'll have to think about that. See, whenever I've come a long way in terms of like not overthinking what I'm saying, which was an inferior TI thing. But anyway, what am I saying? That's the thing. So many thoughts, and it's so hard to organize sometimes because my inferior TI is directly connected to the collective unconscious, and so it's very noisy and it's a lot to sort through. But it also is kind of a superpower because it means that I have access to that. I'm like always plugged in. My thoughts are always plugged in to the collective unconscious when I'm become not afraid to go down there. But anyway, I've worked in marketing for almost 10 years now. Marketers today, this is a great example, is marketing relies on data-driven decisions. You can no longer just be the most popular person in the room and play the political game and be good at people and say, I think this tagline is good, and put it on a billboard because you're popular enough to sway people. you have to, in order to be good at marketing today, you have to be able to know data. You have to experiment. And so this is a perfect example of, even if I were to try and track myself into an ENFJ job, it's going to require feeling and thinking. It's going to require intuition and sensing. I don't know who or how anyone gets the luxury of finding a job that is only tapping their strengths. And there's so much I could say on this. Part of this is we are not assembly line workers anymore. In my video, The Call for Complexity, I was talking about how we are now in the knowledge economy. I think that is even shifting now. I've been posting random stuff on TikTok, just kind of trying to open up my voice again and get through some creative blocks. I will link that below if you're curious. But I made a video a while ago. What was I saying? Gosh. Anyway, I was talking about how in the future with AI and how that is just exploding exponentially, it's not going to be enough. Like, what you know is not going to be enough. What you see is going to become so much more important. What you're able to pick up on, like pattern recognition, is going to be huge. Your ability to organize and aggregate information and to know the right question to ask and to spot truth in a confusing world, that's going to be a lot more important than what you know, because it's almost like we're plugging our brains into the cloud, aka the collective unconscious. We are no longer using our minds, our psyches, as like a storage system of information, knowledge, because we have tools that can store universal knowledge. You can look up facts. And so it's allowing our brains to not have to store and memorize as many facts. We can instead have more brain capacity to observe facts and to make sense of them. And so in order to do, like, this is all part of human evolution. And the way I'm thinking about it now is that the 16 personality types are really paths. They're paths for individuation. Each of us have a path that we're starting with. It's like, if you're thinking of your psyche as a map, it's like, you are here. Like, extroverted feeling was my starting point, but I can't live there forever. The world is not allowing me to do that. In order to, like, and that's what, whenever I said earlier, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I didn't finish that point, but it's like, people need to live. Where are the jobs where you are able to not only just be your type with no complexity at all, but also, where are the jobs to where you're just told what to do? Especially for millennials, we understood the internet and were hired by people who did not. And there's a weird power dynamic there, because they know that you know something about the world that they don't, but they're supposed to be the leader. And I've had this in like almost every single one of my jobs. But it's interesting too, because in my video, the crisis, or that's this video, in the Call for Complexity video, I was talking about we're more divided than ever. That was 2022, and I'm just like, wow, we are actually so divided. Like, that's not even a new thought anymore. But like, I think that what we saw and what we're seeing is people are splitting into opposites, which then is creating tension, and then it's going to require the transcendent function to get over that. And the way for each of us to fight the battle of the tension we see externally is to take full responsibility for the tension within us, our own inner paradox. And the transcendent function is what we need. Because, okay, how do I need to go back for a second. So, Carl Jung identified the 8 cognitive functions. MBTI put those into 16 types. For a while there, the corporate world ate that shit up. And to some extent, they still do. And it serves its purpose. But let's use my experience as an example. I graduated from high school in 2012, only a few years after the recession. And I gave up my music degree in order to do journalism because I thought journalism would be the safe, practical route. I graduated with journalism in 2016, right when people started saying fake news, fake news. There was no affordable journalism. There was no living wage affordable jobs. The people that I know that went to journalism had help from their parents. No offense. I'm not saying all of them do. But if you want to know what's wrong with the media today, maybe it's that people can't afford to be journalists. Maybe it's because people can't afford unpaid internships. So what did I do? I switched to marketing because I thought, okay, this is still using some of my skills. Maybe this will give me a living wage. Let's try this out. The whole time, just want a living wage. Just want to be able to live. It's really that simple. And honestly, we all deserve to be able to use our skills and our gifts and our talents, the things that come the most easy to us. Because we all should do that, right? Like, you're not like asking for too much to want to be able to like use your brain in an efficient way. Because this is kind of a tangent, but that's the thing that I kept coming to is that like the things that I'm good at are not valued as much in society. And they're not as measurable or whatever, like to be like good at FE. Like if the feeling function is devalued in society, and yet it's just as useful, it's just as needed as any other function. Anything you're trying to do, whether you're creating a business or you're trying to solve a problem or you're trying to navigate a difficult relationship dynamic, whatever you're trying to do is going to require consideration of all 8 of the cognitive functions in order for it to work. If not, you'll hit a wall. And then you'll hit a wall, and then that's the shadow. But behind that is going to be the consciousness that you have been neglecting. And I think that that's what happens in the midlife crisis, in the idea that Jung talked about, which it's that for so long, like, okay, my dad is an ENFJ, I'm an ENFJ. My dad was able to graduate with a communications degree and walk in to a big corporation hand his resume over and get a job in communications right out of college. I was not able to do that. My dad was able to get into training and development, and he met like 2 of his lifelong best friends there that are both ENFPs, and they were focused on people and communications. And they made enough to live. They made enough for my mom to be a stay-at-home mom. That's how it used to be. You used to be able to figure out which type you are, focus on your strengths, and develop your strengths. And that was enough. You'd get paid a living wage. And my dad was born 1968, like Gen X. It seems to me like the boomer generation has been able to be their egos almost their entire life, and they might be experiencing a huge ego collapse right now, but millennials are like been there, done that. I've never been able to it's never been sustainable for me to just be my ego. And I think that a lot of us in the type community came to this because we're searching for something. And I think for me, initially, it was very helpful to know, oh, okay, so my brain is naturally attacking problems through the lens of extroverted feeling and introverted intuition. Except for the fact that if the problems that we're trying to solve now are so complex that that's not enough. Or if the it's like I need to explore this idea further, but it's like the internet has changed so much. We now have access to more information. And so it's going to like require greater levels of consciousness in order to understand that. Like when it comes to coming up with a marketing strategy in 2025, you have to use thinking and feeling. That's, I will tell you, I feel like so much of my thinking function has had to be developed for my own survival. Because you can't succeed in a marketing job if your TI is not sharp enough. You also can't succeed if your TE is not sharp enough. So I'd be really curious to hear people's thoughts on this and if they've had experiences in this way. Because I think also when there's a lot of criticism of people not believing in the type system, or they say that their type changed, or they say that they're in between two types, I think that's because they've had an experience in which they've had no choice but to lean in to the transcendent function and grow beyond their type. And that's the thing. Your type was never supposed to be the end goal. Steve Myers talks a lot about this in MBTI versus Jungian Individuation. I think that's the name of the book. I need to reread that one too, because I think that a lot of what I'm talking about is connected to what he's saying as like this spiral growth is hold on, I'm going to pause this. So I think I'm going to wrap this up for now and continue thinking. But I think to sum it up, it's like the problems that we face today in 2025 are extremely complex, and they are going to require collaboration from all of the different personality types in order to solve them. And they're gonna require individuals who are able, first of all, able to collaborate with all of the different personality types without butting heads and getting their egos involved because they are rejecting one of the functions. But even more so, I think that the leaders are going to be those who have done the shadow work and have made peace with their own inner paradox and who are on the path to being the self. I think that in 2025, we need to be the self. And so I feel the transition, I'm going to be transitioning this YouTube channel, rebranding, whatever, to self-discovery. And it always has kind of been that, but for so long I feel like I have been like I mentioned, I was going through creative blocks, but I think that there was a part of me that started to not resonate as much with talking about personality type, and it was because I felt like we were going in circles a little bit. And I think that if the conversation is going to continue to be, am I this or that, then that keeps us stuck. And I would like to pivot the conversation toward how do we understand our psyche, plug into the collective unconscious, do our shadow work, whatever, take responsibility for our inner paradox so that we can become the self, because that's what we need in 2025. Because the internet has changed the economy and the market, and it's also changed our minds, how we think, and information. But I think in 2022, when I was talking about the call for complexity, I was starting to feel into the fact that it was unsustainable trying to just be trying to find a place to keep your ego safe as just a type. And but I think that has blown so far out of proportion with the current like job market, especially in America. I don't know how it's like in Canada or other places necessarily, but anyway, I'm not trying to say like I don't know anything outside of America. But you know what? This new version of me on YouTube is not going to be so defensive, because honestly, I don't want to make y'all who get it have to put me on 2x speed to understand me, because I'm wasting my time being defensive to people who don't understand nuance. So anyway, but the job market is so like trash, and also the housing market. Like, I'm a 30-year-old woman. I live alone. I have a dog. So yeah, and I haven't. These are my new fun facts. Maybe I'll show you the dog sometime on YouTube. But yeah, it's not sustainable. This is not sustainable, and I think that we all know that to some degree now, where it felt a little bit more fringe for me to even be talking about this in 2022. And I honestly, inferior TI, fear of what people think. I think that I've been pushed to a place because, okay, I was laid off in November, and I still haven't found a job yet. And I've been laid off before, and I found a job in 2 weeks after being laid off before, whenever I was like 23. And what's so funny is that it's like, back then, it was a lot easier to find someone willing to give you experience because they saw your skills. I'm not seeing that right now because fears of recessions, people are scared, they're clinging to their comfort. I've been pushed to such a place of things being completely unsustainable in my life to where there's really no use trying to keep my ego safe. And I think that that's kind of the idea of the midlife crisis, is that you build up your ego so that it's safe. If you're an ENFJ, you create a world for yourself where you have an ENFJ job, you do ENFJ hobbies. But we don't live in a world, I really do not think, where you're able to realistically, sustainably get paid a living wage for just doing that. And I'd be curious to think about or hear from you all, or I'd be curious to understand how older generations might be dealing with this, because perhaps there was a time in which that was enough. And I know for a fact, because I got my master's in organizational psychology and learned a lot about training and development. I know for a fact that the trend of training and skill development is that you have to always be upskilling people, because what you learned in your degree is not enough anymore. Even like me, as I'm on the job search right now, I have nearly 10 years of digital marketing experience. I'm having to relearn social media because I wasn't directly managing a social media channel for a couple of years. Now I basically don't know anything. Or, I mean, I do, but it's I have to upskill. Everybody has to upskill. We have to keep up. And, we all gotta eat. We all gotta sleep. And so it's we gotta deal with the shame that comes with our inferior function, or our, dealing with people who are different from us. So at my last job that I was laid off for, I was a digital strategist, and I worked a lot with user experience and IT, and then also marketing, and I was this translator, and I really enjoyed doing that. But what I saw a lot of the time was feeling people, feeling types in this silo, and then thinking types in this silo, and they'd be trying to create a project together, but they didn't understand each other's language. They didn't speak each other's language, and the project would run into all these roadblocks. And so even if it was possible to design organizations that allowed people to really specialize, because sure, there's always going to be specialists, but I do think that this call for complexity I'm talking about, and the crisis of complexity that we're facing today, where people are confused, we don't know where we're going, Um, like, there's always gonna be specialists, but if, in order for anyone to have the privilege or luxury or ability to be a specialist, there needs to be some sort of organizational system that allows us to collaborate, right? Like, if you're going to specialize in IT and then someone else is going to specialize in marketing, you are going to need to be able to speak each other's language, because again, we're solving more complex problems. This isn't an assembly line. Most of us are not in jobs where we're told, do this exactly like this. There's no instructions to follow. You are told, increase ROI or make customers happy. How do you measure those things? And, like, we have to get curious, we have to get creative. And so I mentioned like creative blocks, and, kind of bringing it back to how I even got into type and to begin with is I'm a musician. And this is the thing I keep coming to, is as far as like my identity, or like who am I, that I've been on this journey of who am I for so long, since I was like 18 and got thrust into my first existential crisis, which I don't know if we want to say that is similar to the midlife crisis, but that's where I would love to know if there's been research done on this, or what older generations think, or what have you, in that I think what I went through at 18 kind of is a good example of my point, that I don't know if I'll experience the same sort of midlife crisis in the way that older generations have, because I think that I've been building this muscle of flexibility of having to face my shadow over and over and over again, to where the only constant is change, and the only strength you can find is in your ability to be adaptable, and in your ability to ride the wave as you surf the web, right? Because, okay, I'm going to pause one more time because I lost my thought. Okay, so where I think I was going with that, thank you for following the circles that I'm going here, of the spirals, one can say, of my thought process, because my thought process is so spiral, whatever, is that I think that art is the way. I think that art heals, and art takes us along the individuation path, whether you're creating art or even consuming art. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, because, what I was kind of saying is that it's like, I always identified as an artist, a singer, an actress, even a dancer at one point, a poet. That was me. That's what felt like me. And when I was 18, learned about type, got really obsessed with it. When I was 19, I dropped my music major, and I was like, all right, I need to figure out what the hell else am I good at? What else am I good for if not being an artist? And at the time, too, I was sort of like, well, I think that, I want to actually help people, and I care about people. I don't want my whole life to just be like, look at me and like just performing. Like, I was also worried that that wasn't going to be a service to the world. And I, got into philosophy, I got into psychology and sociology, and I loved personality type. And personality type was like the first thing that really sparked my passion, other than like music. And so that was a big deal for me to find something that sparked my passion. And so that's why I, stuck with it for so long and started making YouTube videos. And, I really went all in. Like, once I graduated college, like, I was into personality all through college. But like, I was like 2022, first job. I, wasn't making a living wage. I qualified for affordable housing. I was living in a studio. And I didn't see a path of where where to go from there. I didn't feel like I was being listened to for my ideas of what I learned in school. And so I started this YouTube. That's when I really went all in with YouTube, because I started to feel like, look, if I don't show my work, if I don't share my ideas, how is anybody ever going to believe in me enough to give me the chance or to give me the experience to develop my ideas? I have to believe in myself. I have to give myself the experiences that I seek. I was wanting to help brands figure out how to start a YouTube channel and build a community. If people weren't going to listen to me, I had to do it myself in order to then show that I know what I'm talking about. And so I feel like this past couple months, like since this last layoff and since the job market is so terrible, I've been rethinking my entire life story, and just like, I'm also going through my Saturn return. It's almost over, thank God, but Saturn and Pisces in the 9th house. And it's like it's kind of been revealed to me that like if we're thinking about the persona and the ego as being different than the capital S self, and how like what we really are seeking is the self, which contains the soul and is also deeply connected to the collective unconscious and everything around us. It's like myself has always been an artist, and then I've been just feeling the tension. Okay, have you watched Severance? You should. I might make a video on it. I should. Because Severance is reminding me, like, the whole idea of splitting your psyche in two, and you have one version of you that goes to work and one version of you that doesn't. I have been running into that issue where it's like, I don't want my LinkedIn persona, my professional girl persona, to be completely different from my real life persona. Or I don't want my YouTube persona to be so different and fragmented from my Instagram persona or whatever. It's like, I think that because there has not necessarily been a safe space for our ego to just lean on the comfort of the 16 types, unless you come from money, to be honest. I'm just going to say that. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to say it. If I came from money, perhaps I would have pursued being a star. Or perhaps I would have pursued being a influencer, to be honest. I mean, I don't really know. Like, or, you know, if I was evil, maybe I would have become a cult leader. I don't really know what ENFJs do these days. But, oh, gosh, where was I going with that? But basically, I have been reconciling and really thinking through the ways in which I felt that I had no choice to kind of fragment my persona, and in the sense that there's this whole idea of like, if you're applying for jobs, you have to be kind of professional to some degree, or like even me to some degree wanting to hide or at least keep separate some of my personality, like online stuff versus my real life community, because I didn't want to like annoy my friends with something that they're not necessarily interested in. And with the job market being what it is today, I've come to the conclusion that like I basically have to sell myself, and I have no choice. I don't want to. I really don't want to. But if we're in a market where the jobs, or where the employer has the upper hand, they're gonna need whoever's applying to pitch themselves, sell themselves to them. So I have to know who I am. I have to be able to communicate what I can offer. And I need to be able to communicate my value in a way that's easily understood and is, you know, logically, to where someone can logically know how I can realistically help them. how would hiring me improve their ROI? I can't just be a charming ENFJ with good ideas. That's literally not enough. So what am I supposed to do? And that's the thing. I have no choice. I've had no choice but to face the shadow. And we experience so much shame around the shadow, and it's like really difficult to figure out, how do I move through that shame, transmute that shame. And so I think that's a lot of the work that needs to be done today, that a lot of us are, working toward. But as I've been going through that process the past couple months, or actually I'm going to back up for a second, and I really think I'm almost done, is that I kind of stopped posting like around late 2022, and part of that was because I was dealing with a close family member who was sick, and I also started a new role. That was the digital strategist role that I was talking about before, and it was a lot more involved. And it was a lot better for me than other roles I've had, because it used up my extroverted energy in a way that I really liked, except for that I had less to give. Like, I used to be, whenever I was like super active on YouTube, I would be like a social media manager or a paid media manager or like a marketing coordinator, to where I was on the computer all the time creating content, and I needed to give myself little mind breaks to kind of do the extrovert thing before then I would come back and zone in. And I really was trying to get out of roles where I was like just zoned in, because I don't really think that works well for my energy. And so in my last role, I was able to it was more interpersonal. It was more like I was consulting with the marketing managers and helping them understand what all the different channels, how that works. And then I would work back with the team of like the social media manager, the email manager, paid media. And so it was at a wider scale, and I was like connecting dots, being in a lot of meetings, talking to people, improving the processes. And that felt a lot more right for me. That was more ENFJ. And so that's great. But it was still, I still, anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that. I think I might just drop it. But anyway, I've been really burnt out. And so yeah, creative blocks. That's what I'm talking about here. Because what I'm leading to is the fact that art and creativity, I think, is the medicine. And that's something that I want to talk about a lot more on this channel. I don't just want to say, this is what ENFJs are, this is what INFJs are. I want to talk a lot more about creativity and the role that plays in the individuation process. I want to talk about marketing, and I want to talk about just anything. Like, for so long, this is what I'm saying. For so long, I've been stuck on this channel in like creative block. And a lot of that is grief, family member passed, friend breakup as well. And just a lot going on. And also just the world. I think so many of us, like, COVID happened, and then things kept going to some extent, and so there's just like a lot of grief to move through. And so I've been just moving through a lot, and then also my job was a lot more demanding. But I've been taking improv classes. Yes, that's what I was gonna say, is that I was listening to, it was August 2022, the Call for Complexity video that I did. That was when I was talking about, I talked about improv, and I'm pretty sure that's when I first started getting into the improv community in 2022. But now I've been into it. I've been very involved in like a local theater, and so I've been really prioritizing in-person community, and it's been really great. And so I haven't necessarily had the bandwidth for like the online community stuff in the same way. And I've been looking for ways to bridge the online community that I've already built, and to kind of expand that, but then also bring it into the in-person community that I've been building. And I if I have to sever my persona and have there be like Heliar versus Helena is how it feels. Like Megan on LinkedIn versus Megan on YouTube. It's just too much. Like, I just want to be authentic. Like, is that so much to ask? And it's been starting to feel like the only way that I'm ever going to stand out in a job interview is if I am authentic. If I try and be like everyone else, and if I try and do all the right things and like water myself down and like be palatable as a person, that's not going to stand out. But also, like, socially, if I care what everyone thinks and I try and please everyone, I'm not going to, magnetize the right opportunities to me, the right people to me in that way either. And so I've been thinking about, how do these things work? And so I've been wanting to rebrand this channel for a long time, but I've definitely been overthinking it. But, there's times for pause and there's times to sprint, and everything's a cycle. I'm super into astrology. I've gotten even more into it in the past few years, and so part of me wants to talk about astrology. See, the thing is that on YouTube for so long, it's been like, oh, you gotta niche down. And then TikTok comes around, and people aren't niching down nearly as much, and it's democratizing information in a way where it's no longer just celebrity and common person. There's influencers, there's micro influencers, but there's also people who just have an account, who just share their voice. And so that's kind of how I've been thinking about it too lately, is I just want to participate in the public square, which right now is online. I just want to participate in the conversation, and I don't want to brand myself as the personality guru. I don't want to have one channel for my marketing side and one channel for this. I want this to just be my YouTube channel that I post stuff on when I have things to say. So that's been something that's been keeping me kind of blocked for a really long time. But like I said, I've been really involved in improv. Improv has been tremendous. I've learned a lot about also the cognitive functions and how they operate through improv. And so that's something I might want to talk about in videos as well. I graduated with my master's in organizational psychology, I think December 2021, and so I may not have ever even mentioned it on this channel or not, but I learned a lot about the psychology behind creativity and collaboration and innovation, and how to create an ecosystem of innovation, and that's also something that I'm very interested in. And this morning, when I had that idea of, oh my God, we're all going through a crisis of complexity, which is kind of the same thing that I was talking about in my call for complexity talk, it just finally clicked all together for me of how I could potentially talk about type in terms of innovation, creativity, but also I'd really like to explore the idea of how can art, and honestly, like, I think comedy is an art form. I sing in a symphony chorus now, and I am a regular improviser at a comedy club. I have tried stand-up. I think that there's just a lot I've done. Not only feeling like I had to develop my TI in order to keep a job, but also my SE. Also having to take things one step at a time, having to be present. I've learned a lot about SE through just being an improv, having to be, present and alert. So anyway, there's a lot to talk about, but yeah, I think that art is crucial. Humans are all creative. Art is not just a luxury for the wealthy or for the chosen ones or for the Nepo babies. We all have every right to make art, create art. We all have every right to a platform. We don't need to be looking around for validation or waiting to be chosen in order to be good enough to be an artist or to create art. We all have every right to have the means to production, to be able to create art, and to be able to share it, to have a platform to share it. And I dream of a world where everybody gets to do that. Also, we all deserve and have a right to our free time. We all have a right to the self, capital S self, because I am not just an employer. I am myself. And if we're thinking about the ENFJ type as at one point in time, perhaps that was one of the 16 type of employee personas. You could think of it like that because that's how it was used. The ENFJ employee is good at XYZ, leading people, holding onto a vision, and corralling people around it. Okay, well, where are the jobs where I get to do just that? I'm not quite sure. And so what use does that have? What use does my ego overly identifying with being an ENFJ, what use does that give me if it doesn't give me money? Like, let's be real. We're all just doing what we got to do to survive. So, but I truly believe that any sort of artistic outlet, creative outlet that you have is going to help you on the path to finding the self. It's going to help you heal your shame, and it's going to help be a mirror for you to see yourself. And it's going to allow you to engage with the collective unconscious and all that. And so I think, like, I said, personality type was like something that really sparked me whenever I gave up my music degree and I didn't really know what else I was good for. And I think that the time that I've not been active online, I have been really giving myself the time with the art that I needed, because I think on some level I thought, okay, well, I guess this path isn't meant for me. And so maybe this path is meant for me. And I think that we're encouraged to specialize. We're encouraged to go all in and devote our lives to either one discipline or what have you. And that's kind of what I mean by call for complexity. And we're in this complexity crisis right now. Something that I'm currently kind of researching is the idea of like the polymath, Renaissance woman, I'm saying woman, Renaissance man, you know what I mean? And the fact that interdisciplinary thinkers are also, the future. And this is kind of what I'm talking about with the transcendent function. But like, I personally feel that if I would have gone all in on, I'm a singer, even if I came from money and I was able to move to New York and do that, or whatever, LA, New York, I don't think I would have been happy necessarily. And someone that made me think this is, Charlie XCX, I believe, is an ENFJ, and I watched, before she even blew up, with like the Brat Summer, which, oh my God, love her so much, love that album, oh my goodness, but there was a documentary with her on Hulu that came out a few years before. I think it was, it must have come out at least like 2021 or something, because it was about how she created the album during the pandemic. And I 100% think she's an ENFJ, and if you're curious, you can go see how she used her ENFJ-ness to develop community despite feeling isolated in the pandemic, and how she collaborated with her extroverted feeling by getting her audience involved in what she was working on. And so she shared the whole process of how she created that album online and like took feedback from her fans and all that. But I remember when I first watched that documentary thinking like, wow, like she seemed like she had a lot of anxiety, which we all do, whatever. I remember thinking at the time, oh my goodness, this would have been me if I would have just pursued music, because I was to some extent on this path my whole life of being a performer. And I guess I was kind of seeing her have this crisis of what else am I good for? And I saw a lot of, like, I had a friend that I really relate to move back home from New York during COVID, because it was like, okay, if all the theaters are shut down, then what am I good for? And I remember feeling at the time, oh wow, I've already had this realization of what am I good for. but I relate to it in the sense that if your ego is identified with being a performer and there's no stage, then who am I? What am I good for? And so that's like that, but so anyway, that's a tangent. But when I watched the documentary, I remember feeling like, okay, that would have been me if I would have put all my eggs in one basket and just been a performer, and not, I would have not been as far along in it when it comes to developing my shadow functions or to developing other interests, like knowing philosophy or sociology, or the ways that I've exercised my brain, the ways that I've exercised my weaker functions in order to become a more adaptable, well-rounded person who is able to survive in a super complex world. And I think that a lot of times we're looking for something to specialize in. We're looking for a track that we could go down that is predestined. But I don't really think that we have the luxury of walking down those tracks so much anymore. And I think that there was a part of me that thought, okay, if being a musician, if that's not my calling, then perhaps personality is. And so I think that there was a period where I wanted to devote a lot of my energy, if not all of my energy, to that. But then that neglects other parts of myself. That neglects the singer in me, the comedian in me. So what I've been working on now, what I've been thinking a lot about now is really wanting to embrace my own complexity and also my channel. I don't want to niche down. I'm not going to. And in fact, I don't necessarily recommend it if you're someone that's starting out and wanting to make content, which, by the way, I will likely be launching something soon regarding marketing help or consulting, whatever. Perhaps even a group. I want things to be accessible. But yeah, anyway, there's a lot for me to think about. And so honestly, I think that art is the way. And I think that I've been resisting the idea of picking one path and going all the way down it, because I don't think that that's sustainable. And I think that we live in a world where we need to be flexible and we need to be able to go from duality to duality. We need to be able to ping back and forth from intuition and sensing, feeling and thinking. And so I still do want to discuss Carl Jung's cognitive functions, but I really need to be opening Pandora's box a bit. So that's that for now. Thank you so much. If you made it all the way through to this video, you should comment Pandora's box. I just came up with that. Why not? Also, I guess, yeah, I'm going to just throw out a call to action there. Tell me. Here's what would be helpful for me if you want to leave a comment. Is, how have you been? What kind of content are you consuming on YouTube right now? What is it that you want from me, if anything? Leave me a comment if you want, because I think I am an extroverted feeling type. I am an extrovert. That's at my core. Which, oh yeah, something I was going to say earlier is that I think okay, I don't know if I want that. I might leave that for another video, but I guess what I was trying to get at is, I'm sorry, I just now have multiple thoughts going on at once, is that, the idea of me trying to find a job that is ENFJ friendly is not so much about my ego wanting to be validated for being an ENFJ. And I think that I've come to the conclusion that so much of it is that every single person deserves and has the right to use their energy wisely, because it's like we only have one life. And so if one simple TI task is going to take 10 times the energy of 10 different FE tasks or whatever for me, it's not fair for me to have to tap into my weaker reserves for 40 hours of week for 40 hours a week in order to survive, because then I'm left with nothing. That's a huge thing I've been thinking about, and I honestly should make, and I might, sorry, there's so many thoughts. NFs, I can honestly make a whole video about NFs and how it's like so many of us are burnt out too, because if a lot of the jobs are requiring us to use our thinking all day, every day, we don't have anything for us, because it's like it's a greater cognitive load. Like I've been thinking about that a lot lately, is that your weaker functions are not dumber. They require more cognitive load. I am fully confident in my ability to use TI. It's just going to be a greater cognitive load. It just is. And so I deserve, and I feel like I have every right, and everybody should have every right to use their energy wisely. Like, give your gifts to the world, give your talents to the world, so that you have enough left over for you. And also, it's going to be more optimized for everyone that way if we all could find a place to do that. But in order for us to build a world where that's possible, we're going to have to dream a little bit bigger, and we're going to have to become adaptable, strong enough people within ourselves to be able to handle all this complexity. But I need to wrap this up. This is a really long video. But yeah, comment, let me know. Yeah, the reason I'm asking this question is because I think that because I've been in my head for so long, I'm just trying to I guess, looking for help and feedback to get me out of my head so that I can start the conversation again, so that I can start talking. So, yeah, thank you so much if you stuck around this whole time, and I'll be around. I will be around.